Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are so excited. I'm Katie Garner, first of all, and I will be introducing Lauren McLean in a moment, but I wanted to welcome everybody here to our very first MOMA Award, which we're super excited to present. The MOMA Award was designed as a means of recognizing the very hard work that's being done, oftentimes by women academics on campuses, but also for the campuses themselves and the universities for being part of the process and recognizing that things need to change, primarily for mothers, but certainly for all parents as we see more people trying to juggle work and family, and those in the sandwich generation doing the work for older adults. All of those things that our personal lives are very much a part of our work lives, and that needs to be accommodated and recognized as we do our best on college campuses right now to also work with the young minds that we're in charge of hopefully bringing into a progressive and interesting and critical space as well. So the reason that we started this program was Nicole and I were both talking about that Working Mother has a top 100 places to work every year that they put out, and usually gets quite a bit of press and fanfare. And I think I certainly know mothers that look at that list carefully when they're thinking about where they want to work, because while that list doesn't necessarily outline the details of what each place offers, it's still a nod to the fact that these places are recognizing the personal responsibilities that go on in women's lives. And I didn't see anything that recognized that type of work or those types of programming on college campuses. And so we devised this program and put out a call, and we got some wonderful applications that came in. It was certainly Nicole who was instrumental in launching this program, and I had quite a few talks about what we wanted to do, who should we pick, these are great. And of course, it was a challenging process, but ultimately, Lauren McLean's work at Western Kentucky University came to the front. And I wanted to recognize or explain that what she has accomplished is getting paid parental leave, a 1 semester paid parental leave at Western Kentucky University. And it's the first of that kind at a public university in Kentucky. So that's a huge accomplishment. And I wanted to also have this space be designed not only so that Lauren can share with us how she did that, but also hopefully give some advice to other people that might be in a similar position in terms of kind of what obstacles she ran into in terms of the hierarchy on campuses, what sort of pushback she may have gotten, what were some of the how to approach the programming in terms of, say, maternal leave versus paternal leave. How do you figure out, some of the details that go into that? And so Lauren and I talked a little bit last week and sort of nailed out a few talking points. And I think based on what she has explained to me, I think she's going to have some wonderful advice for all of us that are in a similar boat in terms of wanting to reform our own campuses and basically use the powers that we have as accomplished women on campus to help the women that are coming up behind us. So with no further ado, if we were in person, I'd be handing over an award and all of that, but I figured we'd pass it up with all the other changes that are going on. But I wanted to give a huge thank you either way and a round of applause all by myself here to the hard work that you did. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Lauren.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. I first just want to thank Katie and Nicole for this award for the university. It's a big honor to get the inaugural award, MOMA Award. So we're really excited, and it was a lot of work and to get this policy created, and so to have the recognition like this is really special. So we really appreciate it. So like Katie said, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of who I am and why this was important to me, and then just some general information about paid parental leave in the US, the kind of where we stand. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir on that a little, so I'll kind of go through that a little bit quickly. And then I'll talk about specifically what we did at WKU and things like that. So a little bit about my background and who I am. So I am a trained family demographer. All my degrees are in sociology, and my research that I have done since graduate school has primarily been on father involvement and co-parenting and relationship quality. And so all of those things are really important to me to study. I have, thought a lot about the ways that father involvement and co-parenting matter for the relationship. So a lot of other research focuses on how father involvement and co-parenting matter for children, but for me, my master's thesis research was on relationship quality. And so that's something that I wanted to kind of bridge those things. And so looking at how relationship quality is affected by the parenting relationship between the parents. And so other research prior to that had been done looking at how relationship quality can kind of predict father involvement in co-parenting, but I was looking at it the other way around. So how does father involvement in co-parenting predict relationship quality? And, a lot of that research has shown that having high levels of father involvement and particularly a good co-parenting relationship are associated with things like decreased likelihood of divorce. For cohabiting parents, it's not necessarily associated with the transition to marriage, but it is associated with a reduced likelihood of separation. And so it does seem to make relationships stronger when both parents are involved. In addition to the research that I've done, I also teach marriage and family regularly. And I just always find in those classes whenever, no matter what issue we're talking about, and thinking about how the social structure matters, how the, options that parents and women in particular have in front of them kind of shape the decisions that they make in their lives. Paid parental leave is one of the things that kind of comes up regularly as a, potential solution to a problem, in a lot of different areas. I also teach a gender and families class. And so that, of course, we talk about these family issues as well. Demography, there's, especially when you're looking at things worldwide and looking at the status of women around the world, policies that allow women to work and be, have that independence and be productive members of society, but also, have a family and be able to take care of their children are really important. And so there's a lot of other courses that I teach as well. And I just always feel like I come back to this, the value of paid parental leave. I've also had 2 babies on the tenure track. When I got my job at WKU, I was 20 weeks pregnant. And so, I had just moved to a new area and didn't know anybody. And, my closest family was 7 hours away. And so it was a really stressful time in our lives. And I was really, what I came to find is that WKU just didn't have any policy at all. And so the non-policy was you work it out with your department head. And so what that meant is that if you had a sympathetic department head or a department head who was more progressive or, that kind of thing, that you might get a good deal. And if you were a good negotiator, you could negotiate a good deal. But if you had a department head who was less sympathetic or you weren't great at negotiating, then you got a bad deal. And so this just led to a lot of inequity across campus. And because I've had 2 babies on the tenure track, whenever anyone becomes pregnant, my name gets brought up and people say, well, go talk to Lauren. And so I had just learned from so many women around campus that the experience that I had was not necessarily the experience that they had, for better or worse. So I thought at the time that I had a good deal. With my first baby, I had a course reduction for the next semester. So instead of teaching 3 classes, I only taught 2. I taught a graduate level class on Wednesday nights, so just once a week for the whole semester. And then I taught an undergraduate class in the second bi-term. And like I said, at the time I thought that was a really good deal. And then I realized later that, that really wasn't a great deal, that it could have maybe been a little bit better. And I did have a very sympathetic department head who I was very grateful for. But I think that we just, the understanding of like what would have been an even better deal, was just not really there. And then I kind of had the same thing with my daughter. She was born at the end of March. And so we did, I had 2 first semester buy terms, and I had a course reduction. But I realized too that I had also earned that course reduction for some work that I did. And then I was like, well, I'll just cash that in. But then I realized then I kind of lost that time that I had earned to work so it really ended up not being the greatest deals, but there were plenty of women across campus that had way worse than I did. And so I really just, looking at this as an equity issue was really important to me, to just see that women across campus were not getting the same experience. I'm also very involved in university service. So I've served on the university senate. I've been at WKU for 8 years, and I think there's only been 1 or 2 years that I haven't been on senate. And then for the last 2 years, I was chair of our faculty welfare and professional responsibilities committee of the university senate. And it was in that role that I was really, as soon as I became chair, I said, this is going to be my mission, to get this paid parental leave policy in place. And luckily, the rest of the committee was on board. And so we were able to make it happen. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about, how we actually did that. But I just wanted to sort of set the background for sort of where I'm coming from and why this was so important to me to look into. So in terms of just paid parental leave in the United States, we are one of only 2 countries in the world that do not have a federally mandated paid parental leave policy, which I'm sure you all know. The Family Medical Leave Act is unpaid, so it allows 12 weeks of unpaid leave for an illness or for care of a member of a family, which includes childbirth. But again, it is unpaid, and not all employees qualify for FMLA. So with the guidelines that are set up to be eligible for that policy, it really only covers about 59% of workers in the United States. So we definitely fall short of having that be a benefit for everyone. And again, it's unpaid, which, most people in the United States live paycheck to paycheck. And so having time off that is not paid, particularly when you're having a baby, which is a really expensive time in your life, is definitely not ideal. And so 5 states have a paid family leave policy that are listed on your screen. And those are in the form of a temporary disability insurance program. And so the way that most of those are funded is with less than 1% payroll tax that goes into this fund. However, if you look at those policies, and there's a really great table out there that kind of compares the policies of those 5 states, they're still not really ideal. People are not being paid at their full pay. They're usually being paid at half or less of their actual pay. And there's a lot of nuances to it. So in some states, jobs are not necessarily even protected if you take paid leave, unless you qualify for FMLA. But again, if you're in a job that does not, where you don't qualify for FMLA, then your job is not protected even if you do take that leave. So we still have a long way to go in terms of it being really what it should be. And so in the last election, this was a point of discussion. Trump and Hillary Clinton both had policies. It was something that they talked about in debates. I haven't heard it as much this time around because we clearly have a lot of other things going on. But I do know that both candidates have at least information about it on their website. Again, Trump actually surprisingly had wanted longer paid leave. I think that was probably Ivanka's doing. But again, he's been in office all this time and that hasn't happened. So we'll see what happens in the future. But I hope that it's something that continues to be a talking point in politics. So just to look at, paid leave around the world. So again, the United States and Papua New Guinea are the only 2 countries in the world that do not offer some form of paid maternity leave. And so Obviously, Europe really does the best at this. So the darker blue countries sort of do better. Canada, certainly. But when we look at the weeks of leave, this is actually a little bit old. So it says that 9 countries don't have paid parental leave, but it really is, it's only 2 now. And so, but you can see just sort of overall the distribution. I mean, there literally are, you know, Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and those countries do better than the United States does on paid parental leave. So it's kind of crazy. These are developed countries, you know, 41 nations. The United States is the only one that offers 0 weeks of paid leave. Again, this is sort of an older image, but I just really liked it because it just does go to show, you know, that even countries that we consider, you know, third world countries are doing better than we are in terms of what they offer mothers when they are out of work. And for fathers, it's actually even worse. There's, you know, there's a lot of countries that don't actually offer any time for fathers. And so, you know, we can see that there's a number of countries that do value men's time with their children and, you know, their policies support that, but the United States does not. So men are not entitled to any time off really, except under FMLA if they apply to say that they have to care for their newborn child or their partner to take care of them after childbirth. So in terms of an actual paid parental leave policy, only 12% of private sector employees have access to paid leave through their employer. And so, you know, really what this, and of course this masks inequality in terms of who has access. So 56% of full-time women have access versus 21% of part-time women. 67% of men have some access versus 65% of women. You know, 86% of workers in the top 25% of earners had access versus only 57% of workers in the lowest 25%. And then in terms of education, in only 38.5% of people with less than a high school degree had access to any paid leave versus 65% of people with a high school degree and 79% of people with a college degree or more. But it's important to know that this is not necessarily paid parental leave, it's just paid leave. So like vacation time or sick time or things like that. And so, you know, really, overall, we can see that 66% of workers have some type of paid leave, but it's not necessarily paid family leave. And so only 12% of workers have access to paid family leave. And so there has been sort of an increase in access over time. This was from a New York Times article that this is just a screenshot of the image that goes multiple pages just to show the number of companies that have increased their paid leave. And as you can see here as well, there's also a discrepancy between the mother and the other parent and the salaried workers versus hourly workers. So again, a lot of inequity there. Some companies are doing a good job to match those, but other companies are not. And again, this was just, you know, the first few on the chart. There's plenty of others. But again, that was in the New York Times. So you could always look that up, or I could send you the link if you're interested. And so, you know, we're seeing increase in access, but it's definitely unequal. Looking at what happens to women who have who have different leave arrangements by education. So the pink bar is when you have some sort of paid leave. And so, you know, it is clear that people with a bachelor's degree or higher have greater access to paid leave. But also we see that when people do not have access to paid leave, that they're more likely to quit their job or be let go of their job, particularly if they're lower levels of education. So, and this is really where my research is going in the future, is sort of looking at my sabbatical this year got postponed until next year, but my sabbatical research is going to be looking at the inequity of access to parental leave across you know, different levels of education and things like that. So what I really want to talk about, and I think this is how it really got started with how we were able to get paid leave at WKU, was the first thing that I did being an academic is do a literature review. And so I went to the literature and I looked at what are the benefits of paid leave for women, for infants, for partners, for the economy, and for the employer. And so, and again, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir with this, but there's a number of benefits of paid leave for women, recovery time after childbirth, particularly if they've had a C-section. We see women have lower rates of postpartum depression. If they have leave, greater time to bond with their baby and adjust to their new role. They're also more likely to breastfeed and breastfeed for a longer period of time, which also has benefits for maternal health. And we also know that, again, having a baby is a time of great expense. Not only do you have medical expenses, but you have to buy diapers and wipes and clothes. And, if it's a first baby, you're buying a crib and a car seat and all of those things. And so it also reduces stress about finances because women know that they're not losing money during the time that they are home with their babies. And then there also is a greater likelihood of returning to work. So women who have access to a paid parental leave benefit become more loyal to their employers, and they feel because they've had that time that they're better adjusted and better able to return to work. And so that is a benefit to help keeping women in the labor force. Of course, for infants, again, bonding with their parents, because they have that increased likelihood of breastfeeding and breastfeeding for a longer time, we know that there's a lot of benefits to babies for that. They're also more likely to go for well baby checkups, which means that there's an increased likelihood of detecting health problems in babies. This is actually even associated with a decrease in infant mortality rate. So babies are less likely to die when their parents have access to paid parental leave and they can go for these well baby checkups. There's more education about baby health and development so that parents also can be tracking and monitoring their baby at home and know to contact a doctor if something has gone, is not really right, if there's an issue. Babies are also more likely to be vaccinated when their parents have access to paid parental leave. And it reduces parental stress, which is associated with more attentive parenting and things like that. And so again, all of that leads to reduced infant mortality. For fathers, men get to become more comfortable with the role of being a parent, right? So they have increased confidence in childcare tasks. If they're home from day one, then they are sharing equally in parenthood. They're bonding with their baby. They're changing diapers. They might be helping with feeding in some way, putting the baby to sleep, things like that. And so all of that really increases their confidence in their ability to take care of a child, which, is extremely important for father involvement and for co-parenting. And so when men have that time from the beginning, it also sort of sets a role, this idea, which goes on the other side of the slide about for the couple, it reduces role traditionalization. So even couples who are pretty egalitarian before they have children are more likely to become more gender traditional after having a baby, particularly if only the woman has time off to care for that baby and the man doesn't. And so then it becomes her job to take care of the baby and to be the primary caregiver. And because she's doing those tasks more, she gets more confident and more efficient in doing them. And so then it becomes easier for, I'm going to pick on my husband who's in the room, but at one point he said, well, you should change the diaper because you're better at it, right? And, we kind of laughed about it and that kind of thing. But it is true, people don't like doing things they don't feel that they're good at. And so when men don't have that time to be able to take care of their child and do those childcare tasks, then it makes that relationship more gender traditional. And it's also associated, so then therefore with a better co-parenting relationship and reduced likelihood of separation. And then for employers, this is key to getting this passed at a university or a place of employment, right? Is really focusing on what are the benefits to the employer? Why does this matter for them? Why should they be invested in this? It really does help with recruitment and retention of quality employees. As you saw, and I know this kind of is going to contribute a little bit to the inequity by education and things like that, by having our places of employment, our universities have a paid parental leave policy, but really, you know, people with higher levels of education have more access to paid leave benefits in the job market. And so for universities to stay competitive, they really should be offering these types of benefits so that they can recruit and then retain quality employees. And I personally know 3 women who left WKU because we did not have a paid parental leave policy, and they just found that to be too stressful when they wanted to start a family. And so you lose good people by not having this type of a benefit. It also increases loyalty of employees. So again, you know, reduced turnover, the reduced expenses that are associated with turnover, and then employees are more productive upon return. So, you know, when they have that time off and they feel like they've recovered from childbirth and they've bonded with their child, that they really can, you know, when they get back to work, they can be more focused and they're more productive. And so really the cost of a paid parental leave option, you know, the cost of paying somebody for an amount of time where they're not working really is outweighed by the benefits of retaining those employees and then the productivity that they will show after that. And then of course for the economy, because parents are maintaining pay during that time off, they are, you know, still spending money in the marketplace and contributing that way. And of course it increases labor force participation by women and lowers the unemployment rate. So that is all good for the economy. And so for me, I thought it was really important when I set out to get this paid leave benefit at the university to show why it was so important. What are all the benefits for all the people involved? And actually what I did was I wrote up a resolution, you know, so our Senate, we do a lot of resolutions when we want to, just kind of get some ideas out there. And so we didn't end up using it, but I wrote it, and I did sort of rely on that a lot in discussions to say, here's why this is so important for the university. And so how did we do it? One thing that I think, you know, I had an advantage of in doing this is that I did have really supportive administrators. So I worked with President Caboni on another committee the summer or 2 before I started working on this. And I remember just saying to him one day, sort of at the end of the meeting, hey, I really want to institute a paid parental leave policy. And he said, good, go write it up. And so I think that was sort of, in my mind, a good, you know, I know a lot of people don't have that from administrators. And so having administrators who support that from the get-go, I think is really important. But having conversations and again, showing those benefits to administrators who aren't supportive right away and kind of making a case for it, I think is a really important way to go about getting a policy like this instituted. So communicating those benefits, showing it as an equity issue. And that was really the main thing for me, is that this is an equity issue. Women across this campus are not being treated the same when they have babies. And that is a huge problem. And so I think saying, you know, if we have a university level policy that is good, right? Because in the past, some people had tried to get a paid parental leave policy before I even got to WKU. And the problem was the people who, surprisingly, you know, from the stories I hear, is that the people who got really good deals were like, well, no, we don't want a policy because we're getting a good deal. And, you know, that's understandable. But if you make it that the policy is better than any deal than what anybody's getting, I think then everybody buys in. And so that was really important. And again, making it a recruiting and retention, focusing on that aspect of it, that this is going to save the university money by reducing turnover, and then also maintaining people here that are, you know, good quality employees. And so one of the things that we did to start also was we compared policies at other universities. So, I was kind of fortunate enough to be in a Facebook group for academic moms, where someone had put together like a Google Doc of, you know, where people could go on, and I guess it's a Google Excel sheet, where people could go on and list what types of policies offered at their university. And so I went and did that, and kind of went to that and just selected the ones that had I really wanted a 1 semester paid leave policy. And so I selected all of those, and there was about 80 something on the list that do offer that type of policy. And so We went and read all those policies. We kind of divided it up as a committee, and we each took a handful, and we went and did some research, and we kind of said, hey, this is what we want to see in a policy. We want it to be 1 semester. For me, it was extremely important that it be available for both men and women, because again, back to my research, when men are involved from day one, that is really important for the baby, the parent relationship, and all of those things. Of course, I really wanted same-sex partners to be involved, so I didn't want it to be based on married, necessarily, or any kind of gendered language in terms of who the parents are, and have any kind of discrepancy there. I just said, if this is for all parents, right? Like, so birth, adoption, men, women, same-sex partners, opposite-sex partners, the policy needs, if it's about equity, then it needs to be about everybody. So again, making it about equity really, I think, helped in that everybody started off from, yes, this needs to be available to everybody. We got HR involved early. So Tony Glisson is our HR director, and I really could not have gotten this policy through without him. He actually wrote the policy. We said, here's all the things we want in it, but technically it's an HR policy, right? It goes under the umbrella of human resources. So having him involved early and involved in those conversations was really important. And again, I was sort of fortunate that he was on board from the beginning. And so I know that's not always the case, but I was really lucky in that respect. And working with Tony was fantastic, because the whole time he kept saying, this is your policy, I'm just helping you with it. Which again, I couldn't have done it without him, but I really did appreciate that he, wanted us as faculty to sort of maintain ownership over it, even though it was technically an HR policy. So we went through lots of drafts. We initially told him, here's what we want, right? Here's the most important things we want to see in this policy. He sort of wrote it up to look, like an HR policy, and then sent it to me. And I think when I got that first draft, I remember being in a coffee shop doing work, and I got the email, and I just started crying in the coffee shop, because I was like, oh my gosh, this could actually happen, And it was just like, holy crap, we're going to do this. And so seeing that was really cool. And then of course we went through it, and I had a ton of comments, and he came to our next faculty welfare meeting, and we worked on that. And we kind of just went back and forth. And then he also said, I know this is sort of a faculty, like you're, from the faculty welfare committee, but what about staff? And so at that point, we also got the staff senate involved. And we, kind of told them what we were doing. So I had a meeting with the president of the staff council and told her what we were doing on the faculty side. But of course, I wanted it to be for everybody. I was just kind of going into it from a faculty perspective. But it really made more sense for the staff council to sort of come up with a policy that would work for them, given that they have different, just different needs, and their, time off and vacation and all that. It looks a little bit different. But what I had said from the beginning was I wanted everybody to have 16 weeks, a full semester, 16 weeks of paid leave. The staff actually only asked for 12 weeks. And so I don't really have any control over that. I do think that looks a little funny that faculty have 16 weeks and staff have 12. But that's what they asked for. So I don't know if they just didn't want to push the envelope, or I'm not really sure about what made them kind of just stick with 12. But that's ultimately what ended up happening. Once it got to the point where we were ready to share it, we sent it to, it obviously went through faculty welfare, we voted on it, and then it went to Senate and the Senate Executive Committee. There was definitely some pushback, a little bit more pushback at the faculty Senate level than I thought there would be, mostly over other caregiving. So people were like, why are we focusing on parents? People have to care for elderly parents and that kind of thing. And it's a really good question. The thing that is also really good about WKU is that we have an extended FMLA policy. So like if, let's say you have surgery, or you have a parent who really needs some help, you can actually take time off under our expanded FMLA, which is paid for some of those things. And so, but really we just kind of said, this would even open the door for more, for other types of caregiving specific policies. And so, I think that was probably the biggest pushback. The other thing was that we have a long winter break. So we have a winter term. And so we have 2 weeks of vacation around for Christmas and New Year's, but then technically the university reopens early in January, but the spring semester doesn't actually start until the end of January because we have a 3-week winter term. And so I think that was where we had the most discussion of it. Does a semester, you know, count? Like, do those 3 weeks count? Because we're technically on contract, but we're not teaching unless you want to teach. And so I think that was sort of our biggest, you know, sort of pushback and, you know, back and forth. But ultimately we were able to just sort of put in place that if the semester that you are taking leave, that you're not expected or required to go to pre-semester meetings. And so that's sort of just how we handled it, that, you know, if there's a department meeting or a college meeting before the semester starts, that you're just not required to go to that. And I also should say that the 16 weeks, you can take it as a full semester, or you can take it to cross semester. So we know babies don't always come at the, you know, the middle of the semester or in the summer. And so you can decide, and you have up to a year to take a year from the time of birth to take it. And for women, particularly women who are giving birth, or their partners, if they need to be home, if there's complications in pregnancy and women need to start it before they've actually given birth, that's fine. So it's a really flexible policy that just allows parents to make the best decision for them. And so it can either cross semesters, or you can just say, I'm taking this fall or I'm taking the spring. So that was really important to us, for it to be flexible. And because you have a year, we also thought that that was important, because particularly for men, I was thinking this was important because it's really obvious if you're the woman that is giving birth that you're going to take your leave right away. But if the partner, you know, maybe they want to wait until, you know, the woman's leave runs out and then take it, that they can do that as well, because it just has to be taken within a year. So again, I think this was an extremely flexible policy that really puts parents in the driver's seat about how they can use it. Some choices that we had to make. So we have a stop the clock policy already at WKU, which is that you, for, you know, any set of, you know, qualifying events, you can pause your tenure clock for a year. And so we debated whether or not this should be that if you take parental leave, that it should be an automatic stop of the clock, or whether you had to still opt into it according to that other policy. We decided that we didn't want to penalize people. Like, if you take this time, like, that's still part of your time to tenure. And so, you know, and we know in academia, that raise that comes along with promotion is one of the only major raises that we get in our career. And we didn't want parents to then feel like they were forced to have to push that off another year for having a child when they were on the tenure clock. So we decided that you still have the option, of course, but it wasn't going to be automatic. Now, I have heard some arguments that the other way is better, that making it automatic means that making it automatic would level the playing field for people, that people might be, you know, that men and women then are sort of, that maybe they'd be more comfortable taking it if it was automatic than if it was something they had to opt for. I'm not really sure about that. I kind of just fell on the other side, where people still have the option to make it automatic or to stop the clock if they want, but it's not required. Because in the policy, it also says that time taken for paid parental leave should not count against your tenure and promotion. So at WKU, you have to be employed for 5 years before you can go up for tenure. And so if in that time you take a semester, it's not like that time just like disappears and you have to wait another, you know, year to go up for tenure. It's still, you would still go up at your normal time, even if you've taken leave, unless you pause the clock. So those were just some discussions that we had. Ultimately, we thought that parents would be benefited more by not automatically stopping the clock. But that's a decision that you would have to make at your university. And our stop the clock policy too has like a time limit. So if if parents decide, I don't want to stop the clock, and then let's say they have a really traumatic birthing experience, or their child has, you know, illnesses or something that they're really going to need more time to attend to, they can stop it a little bit later. So people can change their mind within a given time frame. The other big question, and this is, I will say, the one thing of the policy that I'm the most disappointed in, is what if both parents are employed at WKU? And of course, my initial thing is, well, they're both parents. Who cares if they're both at WKU? They should still both have full access to this policy. And it was the one thing the administration pushed back on, because they had recently made some hires of couples within the same department, and they were smaller departments, and they were basically making the case that if both of those people took paid leave, especially if they took it at the same time, that would be particularly problematic for those departments. At the time in the semester that we were trying to make all of this happen, I was nervous if we pushed back on that too much at that point, it wouldn't get passed in time for that semester, and we'd have to wait a whole nother academic year. So it was something we kind of gave in on a little bit. I would like to go back and address it and make more of a case for why we should all have, you know, why both parents should have it. Because to me, I feel like then it's sort of a, then you're being penalized in some way for both of you working at WKU, which goes against the spirit of the policy. So, but the good thing that we did write into the policy is, let's say one parent is a faculty and one parent is a staff, they can split the time. So if two parents work at WKU, they can split the time. But if one parent is a faculty and one parent is a staff, and remember staff only opted for 12 weeks, they can share the full 16 weeks. So we sort of went on the more generous end of the amount of time that they have to share. So again, that is something I would like to go back and revisit and try to maybe just put in some if-then statements, you know, like, so if both parents are employed at WKU and they're both in the same department, then they have to take it, you know, consecutively to minimize the impact on the department, or that, you know, if they're employed at WKU in different departments, that they both get access to it because one's job is not impacting the other. I think I'd really like to revisit that. So that's one thing. And then we talked about some limitations. So, you know, some people said, well, should there be a limit to how many times you can use this policy? Well, no, if it's a parent-centered policy, people should be able to decide how many kids they want to have. So no, there's no limits in terms of how many times you can use this policy. For our sabbatical policy, there's, you know, a stipulation that you must return to WKU for a year after you've taken the sabbatical, or you have to pay that time back. And so that came up, is if people get access to this leave, should there be a requirement that they have to come back to work? And again, we said no. You know, parents, you know, they might, you know, have a child that has special needs or has some other thing where they decide, I just can't go back to work. Or they may decide, you know, it's really hard living away from family, and I really want to, you know, now that we have this baby, we want to move back by family. That's not a decision that WKU should be making for people. So there's no stipulations like that. Like I said earlier, it is specifically written in the policy that time taken for paid parental leave should not be counted against people in tenure and promotion processes, and there should be no discrimination or retaliation or anything like that for people taking that time. Of course, since it's a new policy, we have yet to hear any stories of how that actually plays out. So that's something we're definitely going to be keeping our eye on in the future. There's also a question of what if someone does do work during that time? Of course, the time is to spend with your child, but, you know, so what happens if people are doing work during that time and just kind of using it inappropriately? There have been some studies that show that when men take time off for paid leave, that they use it to do work and get ahead rather than to actually spend time with their child, not at WKU, just sort of a general study. And so I think that's something that we just want to keep an eye on in the future, make sure that there's no gender differences there. And then foster parents were not included in this policy. And so I don't know how to make that work. So, because, you know, fostering is just so different, right? Like you could foster 100 kids in your life, and you might only have them for a few days or a few weeks, and there's no way to plan for, if you get a call in the middle of the night. And so ultimately, I would like to find some way to make it easier for academic parents to be foster parents. I just didn't know how to do that in this particular policy. And so that's certainly something, if people have ideas on, I would love to hear. So I know my time is getting to the end, and I just sort of wanted to wrap up and I don't know why that came up funny like that. Some other ways that your university can support mothers and families. So having conversations with administrators in particular to acknowledge that people are also parents and caretakers and have responsibilities outside of work, I think is super important. So during COVID, we've heard sort of the horror stories of administrators who don't acknowledge people's caregiving responsibilities at all. But we also, at WKU, I've actually been really pleasantly surprised that, in the communications about what's going on, the administrators have continually acknowledged that, parents have children at home, or that, if you have adult parents that you're taking care of, that we can be flexible and just sort of appreciating the work that people are continuing to do with those added responsibilities at home. So that's important. I think training for department heads and deans to help create a culture. So not only to train them on this new policy, but, tell them that, this is how we keep people, is by acknowledging, what they do outside of the university as well. And I think also that would increase in consistency across campus. Visiting Stanford University's work-life office webpage is really an ideal model. I think I get so jealous when I look at their webpage, because they've just really got it figured out how to really have people balance work life issues. And so Phyllis Stewart Pyers is the associate director of that office, and I've had many conversations with her. A couple ideas that she had expressed that we haven't done at WKU yet, but might be good ways for your university to support women, is to, they offer a grant for faculty to bring children to conferences or to pay for childcare while they're at the conference. And I was like, oh, that could be kind of expensive. And they were like, well, not really. Because if you think about the number of people on campus who have young children, you can apply once per year, and I think it's up to $1,000. And so, it's just a way that she said it really actually doesn't cost that much to do. That's a way to sort of value family and the impact that, going to conferences has on parents, which of course no one's traveling for conferences right now, but when that does come back, that would be great. Another thing that's free is to partner with local childcare centers for discounts. And so just approaching different childcare centers and saying, hey, would you be willing to offer a discount to employees of WKU? And for doing so, we'll list you as like a preferred childcare center on our human resources webpage. And that's something, again, in this COVID time where some childcare centers are closed and things, that's not, it's not an ideal time to work these things out. But when things do start to get back to normal, that might be, something that's free for universities to do. And that also helps in local businesses and stuff. So those are just some ideas. Some other things you can do just to wrap up, talking to your administrators, contacting state and federal representatives about getting a federally mandated paid leave policy or state paid leave policy. Of course, voting and supporting political candidates who want to work towards those things. Just talking with community partners. A lot of us work in the community with different organizations. So just talking to them about the benefits of paid leave policies and encouraging them to adopt those. And just talking to friends and family, keep the conversations going. And then just thinking about other family-friendly policies that could be offered. And again, with COVID, I think we're seeing that people do have the ability to, have flexible hours and working from home and things. So hopefully that will help. So thank you so much again for this award and just for the time to talk to you about what we did. I really appreciate it. And, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. My contact information is here if you want to email me and talk about what you're doing at your university. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was an amazing talk. I see we have about 10 more minutes. Can you hear me, Lauren?
Yep.
Okay, I wasn't positive. So we do have about 10 more minutes. We wanted to have some time available for everybody to ask questions. I'm sure that there's a few, and I see one already coming in, and it's from Ariel. Did you raise your hand or did you post a question, Ariel? It might be in the Q&A. I forgot that we're in webinar mode. So, but I thought that I saw, if you can post your questions either in the Q&A box or in the chat box, that would be preferred, because that way we can address your questions. Since
there is a question from Summer in the chat that
there we go.
I didn't talk about that. So Summer asks, how is the leave funded? And did you have to come up with a plan or a budget for that? We didn't. I mean, our faculty lines are already, you know, they're already in the budget. And so faculty just can, you know, faculty and staff just continue to be paid just like they normally would out of their normal budget. And so we didn't really think that, you know, it was necessary to, you know, to have a separate budget or to shift where people are paid from or anything. They just get their pay like they normally would. And so in that respect, nothing changes. So, so that's really cool. And then there's another question about adjuncts, and that's one thing I did forget, and teaching loads. So we made it so that full-time faculty are eligible immediately. That's the other thing, is we didn't have a waiting period. And this was important to me. Like I said, I started at 20 weeks pregnant, so I didn't have time to work for a year before I would have been eligible for that, right? And so it was really important to me to make sure that, you know, this benefit was available right away. So for full-time faculty, it's available right away. For part-time faculty, so for adjuncts, it was also important for me, we have a lot of adjuncts that have worked for years at the university. And so I really didn't want them to be left out. And so you do have to have worked one full semester before you're eligible. And then basically we will pay for the modal number of courses you've taught in the last 2 years. So if you've only taught one semester and you taught one class, then you would be paid for one class. If you've taught, you know, 5 years and you typically teach 3 classes a semester, then you would get paid for 3 classes. So we thought a 2-year time frame was sort of reasonable. We have some adjuncts, like I said, that have taught for 10, 15 years, and the number of courses that they've taught over time might change. So we look at, you know, within the past 2 years, what's the modal number of courses that you teach in a semester? And then that's what you would be paid for that time. And so again, I think in terms of that, they would just be paid out of that department budget, just like they normally would. But what Tony had said is that if the department can't pay for that and then pay for a replacement for them, that then it would go up to the college. And if the college couldn't pay for it, it would go up to the provost's office. So somebody would pay for that, but there's not like an exact mechanism. He kind of just said, we'll work it out. And so that was the other good thing about working with Tony. He was just kind of like, it's the right thing to do. We'll just figure it out and do it. So, so that was really great. And then in terms of teaching course loads, you know, again, we didn't really specify, you know, if someone typically teaches 3 classes, then someone else will have to do that. We just figured that would be worked out at the department level. You know, there's a lot of people that just teach electives. Maybe that elective just doesn't get taught that semester. Or if somebody teaches a required class, then someone else would just step in and teach that required class. And maybe they wouldn't teach one of their electives they normally offer. So we really just felt like we couldn't really, it didn't need to be in the policy to dictate how those things worked out. We just figured department heads would just sort of on a case-by-case basis, you know, figure out what needs to be covered and what can we just not do for this semester. And so it's not the case, I don't think, and again, maybe this is something to track and see, you know, how it actually plays out, but it's not the case that we're saying that if somebody teaches 3 classes, then other faculty in the department then have to teach those classes in addition to their course load. That's not, we're just saying that maybe just something just doesn't get taught for a semester. So, and making sure departments will teach what is, you know, necessary. So I think I answered that. And then let's see, there's another one in the chart. Canada seemed lower than I thought on your chart. Are you saying full parental leave or percentage? I have to look back at that chart and see which. Let's see. If someone else has a question in the meantime, while I'm kind of looking back at that.
There is a question from Ariel as well about whether or not you'd be open to consulting with some people that are trying to get something like this through, if you'd be open to having further conversations, I presume via email or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, and I have actually one of my friends at another university that we do research on, we've talked about, consulting. I think and I would certainly love to do that. I'm certainly happy to answer sort of like general questions, and then I'd be willing to, actually have a consulting contract if you wanted me to do more of the legwork, for you and stuff. I'd be happy to talk about how we could arrange something like that for sure.
How kind. Thank you. Are there any other questions that are coming in that pressing questions? Anything? Kind of, we're at the last call point to raise your hand and chime in.
Linda, the only one that I saw about your question about Canada was the weeks of pay, but they have more. Canada, well, at least from this chart, which was actually a couple years old, they're definitely not less than us. Where is Canada on here? I don't know. Canada does really well with their paid parental leave, so they're definitely not less than we are, but I'm not seeing exactly in which chart you're referring to. So
that might be a follow-up question that
we can talk about that later.
If you want to, Linda, if you'd like to contact me, and if you're okay with it, Lauren, then I can connect you to and possibly work out kind of the details of that. But certainly I think all mothers need to be more supported on their campuses, regardless of where they are. And the MOMA Award is open to anybody on any campus around the world. So there's no preference given to country of origin. I think that anything that improves what's being done on campuses to support mothers and parents more generally should be acknowledged. And we hope that you will tell your home campuses about this program so that we can acknowledge the work that's being done. And I certainly know that I have learned a lot from Lauren's talk today, and I really, really appreciate the time that you've put into not only the work on your campus and all that Western Kentucky University is doing, of course, to support mothers and parents, but I appreciate you taking time out of your day today to share with us what we can be doing to further this work on our own campuses. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really great time. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, Lauren.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.